dans la mythologie de M. George Bush, il existerait une autre puissance qu'une puissance étatique capable de rivaliser avec les États-Unis. C'est une organisation qui s'appellerait Al-Qaïda, non pas Al-CIA, mais Al-Qaïda, et qui aurait une dimension mondiale, planétaire. Alors on peut douter de cette chose-là, puisqu'on a dit qu'on allait parler librement. Il se trouve qu'un officier des services secrets de Sa Majesté britannique, David Shayler, a révélé divers éléments sur la fabrication de cette Al-Qaïda dans un livre qui a immédiatement été interdit dans son pays. M. Shayler a alors été incarcéré pour la violation des secrets de la couronne, mais il est libre aujourd'hui et il va s'exprimer pour 8 minutes.
Hello, thank you. It'll probably be a surprise to you that anybody who has any connections at all with MI5 was actually admitting that in this room. Yeah, I joined the British security services to stop terrorism. I joined in the early 1990s at a time when the IRA were putting down bombs on British streets, and an inevitable result of that is that innocent people will die. But I left the services because MI6 decided to fund associates of Osama bin Laden in Libya. They funded him to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars, and he would not have been able to carry out that operation without the help of MI6. And I say MI6, this was not the British government, in fact, because MI6 did not seek the permission of the government for the attack, which of course would have given the officers an immunity in Britain for this attempt or funding of murder. Under the 1994 Intelligence Services Act in Britain, the real James Bonds, as I say, do have a license to kill, but only if they have the permission of the Foreign Office. This operation went ahead in March 1996. An agent who MI6 had codenamed Tunworth. The operation involved infiltrating Gaddafi's security entourage and then throwing either a bomb or a grenade under his car. Unfortunately, they got the wrong car. Now, this would be funny if innocent people hadn't died. And when I first blew the whistle on this, would you believe there were commentators in the British media who suggested that the loss of the lives of innocent civilians in Libya was collateral damage for an MI6 operation that had gone wrong? I pointed out that if it had been the other way around, and Colonel Gaddafi had funded the IRA to try and assassinate Tony Blair, God forbid, and they had failed and killed innocent people, nobody in the British press would call that collateral damage. The lack of respect for human life is, to me, the beginning of tyranny, the beginning of totalitarianism. But I had my eyes open to British democracy and the myth of British democracy when I blew the whistle on this, because I used a legal route to alert Tony Blair's government to the existence of this illegal plot. And when I did so, I was the one thrown in prison. I was thrown in prison in France. The French authorities had no choice but to cooperate because the British wanted to extradite me. Fortunately, the French courts pointed out that what I had done was manifestly political and was therefore exempt from any extradition treaties. But while I was in prison, the British Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, actually said that what I was talking about was pure fantasy with no basis in fact. He had done this without holding any kind of inquiry. He'd clearly gone to the head of MI6, who had denied this. And this shows you what the services do in Britain, even when they are caught red-handed. They will lie their way out of it. And they probably think they can get away with it, because in Britain it is extremely difficult to get any information out of the intelligence services. The model of Britain's intelligence services, particularly MI6, much more closely follows that of the Iranian and Libyan services, where the services operate beyond the rule of law, without accountability, and can therefore kill people with impunity. But, fortunately, a very principled person put a document on the internet, an MI6 document, which confirmed the details of the plot as I had described them. It didn't confirm the payments, but it did confirm that an MI6 agent was working amongst these plotters, that these plotters were Islamic extremist terrorists. And the document which predated the plot also showed the modus operandi, so it showed that somebody wasn't reporting simply on events they'd heard about. Now, you'd think in those circumstances the Foreign Secretary would withdraw his statements, would apologise and immediately order an inquiry. But even then he didn't. And to this day, the British state will still tell you, if you phone up the Foreign Office, that what I was saying about MI6 funding Al-Qaeda to carry out an assassination operation was pure fantasy with no basis in fact. It is like living in the former Soviet Union. And I actually believe that in doing what I've done, I've actually scratched the surface of British democracy and exposed the myth of British democracy. Because at the heart of what is going on wrong in the world at the moment is Britain. It was the MI6's intelligence that was used by George Bush and Colin Powell, in particular, to the UN to try and justify the invasion of Iraq. It was the first time the British intelligence services had ever made any document public in that way. And what did we find out? That not a single fact in that document was right, not one single piece of up-to-date intelligence. And yet, they allowed that intelligence to go out. They allowed the Prime Minister to manipulate it. And of course, at the time, I did everything within my power to alert the British media, to alert Parliament, to alert the government, to what I could manifestly see was a bad idea. It was going to be another Vietnam, as well as being illegal. But the problem is, as well as the British intelligence services control the British media, they have agents of influence in the press. They leak information to these people, so no one is ever on the record. And we've seen some excellent examples of this with the 7/7 attacks, where one day they were all leaking to the British media that this had been caused by military explosives. The next day, the very next day, they were all leaking to the British media that it had been caused by homemade explosives. Now, both of those cases obviously can't be right, but because nobody went on the record, nobody is ever held to account. And that is why it is imperative that we don't just have an inquiry into some of the things I have blown the whistle on. And that doesn't just include MI6 funding of Al-Qaeda, it also includes the story of how the Israelis bombed their own embassy in London in 1994 and then framed two innocent Palestinians. Two innocent Palestinians on whose behalf I have sworn evidence. And yet the British Appeal Court has ignored that new evidence and sought to uphold those convictions. There is no mystery, really, about how terrorism is created. It is created out of the circumstances of social deprivation, of poverty, where one community has all the wealth and the power, and the other community simply cannot change its circumstances. Whether we're talking about 1980 South Africa, or whether we're talking about Northern Ireland in the 1960s, or current-day Palestine or Kashmir, that is quite obvious. But there is another element to this terrorism, I believe. This terrorism is coordinated by MI6, by the less reputable elements of the CIA and so on. They work on this disillusionment and fund and train and encourage terrorist attacks. So if you want to take a message away from this, let me be guided by my final phrase, which is something I've used to inspire myself over the years when I've sat in prison cells. It's a quote from an Englishman who was actually a defender of Britain's parliamentary system, called Edmund Burke. All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Thank you.
Pour conclure cette table ronde, je donne la parole au général Leonid Ivachov, ancien chef d'état-major des armées de la Fédération de Russie.